Hey there, disruptors and curious minds. Welcome to another episode of Thinking on Paper. This is Jeremy Gilbertson, and with me is my co-host Mark Fielding. Mark from the French Alps. How are you, sir?
Hi, Jeremy. Yeah, I'm good. What have I been doing? I've been reading the new Bret Easton Ellis book this week, The Shards. So it's been a very freaking weird week, actually. So I'm looking forward to changing my headspace and getting out of the kind of superficial, paranoid Los Angeles of the 1980s and speaking about music in the metaverse with you and our guest Inder today. So yeah,
Man,
AI,
it's
deepfake, music.
yeah. It's super funny. You just triggered a memory that I had. One of the first film projects I ever scored was this independent film years ago called The 13th Sign. I think it was like 15, 20 years ago. We were so excited to get this film project. We started watching the director's cut, my business partner and I, and it's a horror film, like gore horror film. This dude's like splayed out and his guts are hanging out. And I'm like, oh boy, how do we figure out a way to not do this? But we ended up doing the film, long story short, but we had to like substitute cartoons. Like we would watch cartoons halfway through doing this because it was such a dark and funky headspace. So I can totally relate to what you're talking about with the
Oh,
long
yeah.
story. But yes,
Is there a bigger juxtaposition between like the dark, seedy serial killer 1980s LA and what we're going to talk about today, kind of like deep fake music, AR in virtual worlds? I mean, you can't get any further away. So you know me, I like the balance.
I love it. Well, I'm going to tie something in, and what we do is try and find a thread and then explore that thread. So I've been reading this book, The Jazz of Physics, which is absolutely amazing. It's an astrophysicist, professional jazz musician that wrote it,
Not many
and
of those.
I know not a lot of those, right? So a lot of
Kind
the
of.
things that come out of the reason why I bring this up is music extends everywhere. You know, where we are in nature, black holes actually emit a sound, and the sound is 55 octaves B flat below middle C. It's documented. Cosmic background radiation emanates a certain signal, a certain sound that some people think started the world we live in. So anyway, with that, I thought it was interesting to kind of
Yeah.
tee that up, that music is everywhere. It's a part of everything we do and who we are. And we are really excited to talk to one of the OGs in the Web3 emerging tech metaverse music space. He's been in it for a long, long time. I'm going to give a quick intro and then I'll let him kind of add some color to it. But his journey takes him from early tax accountant E&Y days, moving through music, brand, tech, doing artist partnerships, building technology companies, and now ultimately in the CEO of a company called Pixelynx, who was recently acquired by Animoca. Super excited to bring onto our virtual stage Mr. Inder Phull. How are you,
Hey,
sir?
hey, I'm great, thank you. The Jazz of Physics sounds like such an incredible book. Thanks for putting that on my radar.
It will blow your mind. Like I'm cross-eyed and painless at the same time, man. It's great.
I love
Yeah,
it. How you guys doing?
we're great. Thanks so much for joining. Where are you joining from, Inder?
I'm in LA right now.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, give us a little bit of background to your I hit some of the beats, but give me a couple of the highlights that actually were some of the Lego blocks to what you're doing today with Pixelynx.
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess music is something that's been in my life for a long time. I think I started making music when I was about 10, 11. I saw my cousin DJing, and my other cousin was playing Grand Theft Auto, and one of them was DJing, and I was like, wow, I want to do that. He was playing jungle, and I was like, I have no idea what's going on, but it looks incredible. He was mixing jungle on some vinyl, and I was like, this looks so fun. So I DJing, and that just takes you very far from DJing to production. And yeah, so that was the start of my music journey. Sort of, intro to DJing. Very quickly got excited about kind of music production and started learning how to make music. And then I was in university, sort of thinking about what I was going to do next. As you mentioned, I did an internship in a major tax firm, and was like, this is probably not for me. and decided to set up a business which would help brands access culture, like that, whether it was skate culture, music culture, youth culture in some ways. My first client was Lacoste. I then worked with Disney, HS. You guys got me okay? Yeah, I'm in.
It was coming in and out, but you're okay. Yeah, keep it rolling. Cool. You're back.
Yeah, cool. So so back from there very quickly, started working with these major brands, and my kind of role was basically helping these brands access kind of youth culture, and music was the heart of that. So I would be pairing up brands with different talent, and in the middle of it, use technology and different kind of immersive experiences to bring these brands' messages to life. And over time, got more and more obsessed with gaming, with gamification, with blockchain, and really this sort of culminated in the launch of Pixelynx. One of the projects I launched when I was 25 was a giant synthesizer. It was literally a 6-foot synth. And it was like, hundreds of people, thousands of people playing on this, sometimes like together, and something clicked. I was like, wow, like if you reimagine how music is delivered, it can be such a fun shared experience. And that one project stuck with me for so long. I kept kind of obsessing over this idea of like shared music, interactive music, like how could music be delivered in a new way to kind of create this experience. And one of the big moments, COVID happened, kind of saw the music industry crumble, and really felt like there must be another path here for artists to survive, not being solely reliant on tours, but there must be new business models, new revenue streams. And I felt like gaming presents one of the biggest opportunities, not only as a medium, and a canvas for artists to release their music and express themselves in new ways, but also as a vehicle to unlock new revenue streams. So partnered up with Richie Hawtin, with Deadmaus, 2 icons and visionaries in the space, and really kind of mapped out a vision for where we thought the future of music would go. And our thinking was really, the intersection of music with gaming, AI, Web3. How would these technologies come together to create new formats, new experiences? And that led us to the launch of Pixelynx, which I'm sure we'll get into in more detail. But music's always been in my life, as you can probably tell. I love making music. I think it's one of the most magical, experiences of our human kind of human experience. And I love the idea of sharing it, whether it's in some form in the physical space or digital otherwise. And it's what kind of that's the journey.
Amazing. Well, quick shout out to Matt in the chat. Music of the Spheres, absolutely. Pythagoras is in the house, especially in that book reference. Absolutely. Zach, what's going on, my friend? Good to see you out there. So yeah, let's talk about the framework of this, right? Because obviously interactivity and interoperability are 2 kind of core tenets for you guys at Pixelynx and all of the things you're doing. How did those 2 core principles weave in and out of innovation and product development for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Music it's beautiful in a sense that it's so kind of simple in its delivery, right? It's just audio, whereas the rest of the world has kind of moved so far into video and interactivity. But music ultimately can be very simple. It's it's not dynamic. It's like delivered in this static form, which I think is great on the one hand. But I think many artists have always been kind of poking at that, like, is that the only way to experience music? Surely there must be a more dynamic, reactive, interactive experience around music. And that's been something that artists like Deadmaus, like Richie, have been playing with for a long time. They're kind of excited about giving fans stem files and creating more interesting ways for fans to kind of experience their music. So I think the idea of interactivity has been around for a long time in principle, but the format's never really changed because there's not many platforms for artists to kind of create interactive music or deliver something that's a more dynamic kind of format. So, really now we're in a space where technology's evolved so fast, whether it's just through the web or mobile, we can deliver new styles of music experiences. And part of our thinking was, well, let's push that. Let's see what that new music experience could look like, where it's not just so rigid as like a song that's 3 minutes, but, is an experience that fans can get into. So high level, we were thinking about that a lot. And we started down the process of developing multiple products that we were testing, just like how could we experiment with new ways to experience and interact with music. One of the products that we were testing was it was a mobile music collection games. You could imagine like Pokemon Go for music. And the idea is you could explore the world around you and start to discover music, stem files, and more content, and just kind of create a new layer of collection. And, over time, we tested that. We've launched a number of other sort of mini games and experiences that just give fans like a deeper way to collect and participate with the music experience. So that's one aspect, and we'll talk more on the kind of product we're developing. But I think the lens of like interactive music is something that is here now. It's a big conversation. There's a lot of artists who are experimenting with what that could mean and how they deliver their music in a more sort of dynamic way. And then the idea of interoperability, which, largely a Web3 concept, being able to take an item that you own and use it in multiple different platforms is really interesting, especially for the music industry, because we are so kind of tied down to the old way of doing things, right? The music industry is the most limiting when it comes to thinking about content and listening to music, for example, in a game. It's extremely challenging because on the one hand, you then have all of these fees to pay, sync fees. You have to get approvals across multiple stakeholders. So the music industry is almost like locked by its inability to freely kind of let music flow in all of these new environments. So there's this challenge on how do we find new ways to kind of distribute music in places like the metaverse, in games, in new environments without, basically causing a major sort of cash burn for the developer, which is typically what happens. So what we see is music has never really kind of extended into these new spaces because the business model just doesn't work. And I think with the concept of interoperability, we start to open up new ways to think about music as a format that can be consumed and experienced in multiple platforms without some of the limitations of traditional licensing and sync. And so a lot of that is in the early stages of kind of evolution. But yeah, I think, it's a really exciting space. On the one hand, interactivity is really pushing the music experience forward, giving fans a more immersive way to get, into the music. And then on the other side, I guess interoperability is like, how do we let music be free? Like actually let people take music that they've owned, like they've bought or collected, and listen to it in all these different environments without, having to continue to go through multiple paywalls or just not even having the option to have that music there in the first place. So, there's a ton of stuff to unpack, I think, within both of those. But, it's a shame on the one hand, right? The music industry is so archaic, right? We have this industry which has huge potential, touches billions of people, but the music industry, for some reason, has a sort of wall around how we actually can take that music to the next level and transform its value. So we're in this really interesting time right now where I think everyone's expecting music to evolve, to become more immersive, more dynamic, for the industry to grow in value. And at the same time, we have a very archaic infrastructure that makes it difficult for music to actually reach its full potential. So I look at interoperability or Web3 as part of the tool set that will unlock new ways to kind of distribute music and actually allow artists to maximize, the reach of their music without having some of the traditional challenges to worry about. But again, very exciting time. A lot of incredible companies kind of building in this space right now. And yeah, I'm excited for the future, even though, the music industry has its challenges.
For sure. Do you mind? So Jeremy is the musical expert. So I'm coming from this as a fan more than anything else, as a music fan. There's a lot that you've just mentioned. And looking at Pixelynx, I see you've got different products as well. You talk about an ecosystem. You've got Astral and Chorus, and there's another one whose name I don't know how to pronounce, but it's like Elixir. So obviously, like are you looking at this as 3 or 4 or many distinct paths? Like how are you thinking about the different paths to this more immersive musical experience? Like how do we get there, and what do these separate paths, which I guess coincide with your separate products, consist of? I mean, how should non-musical producers think about this?
Yeah, and it's a good question. So one of the first, what's going on here?
You're good. We just did a zoom in. Yeah.
Cool. I got scared there. I was like, what's going on? Yeah, no, it's a good question. So we've, as mentioned, we were acquired by Animoca Brands a few months ago. And as part of that, we're already building out this sort of music arm and music strategy of the Animoca ecosystem. So one of our first products was, it's called Elixir. It's a mobile geolocation game. You could think of sort of music Pokemon Go in some ways. And the idea is you can explore the world around and discover and collect music NFTs really simply. You don't need any sort of complex Web3 elements behind it, a wallet or anything on that level. So we've been testing that. We've tested it with some great partners, Spinning Records, which is one of the largest electronic dance labels in the world, Mousetrap, and a number of great artists in the Web3 space, artists like Talk Time, Angel Baby, and more. And the game is very simple in its premise. Like Pokemon Go, you basically can explore the world and start collecting music NFTs. And that's one of the first products that we brought to the market. And the idea was to just get people collecting music again and try and experiment with new ways to drive collection. So that product is built in partnership with Niantic, who's also one of our investors. And we're using the Niantic Lightship platform. It's the same technology as Pokemon Go. So we've been testing that, as mentioned, for the last few months, and you can see some info on that online on our website. So that was one of the first pieces that we launched, and we'll continue building that out. In the next few weeks, we're also launching Chorus, which is an AI companion. So you can imagine, first we have this music Pokemon Go style experience, and what we're about to launch is the species. So we have a number of species that we're developing. One of them is going to be with Mousetrap, the iconic label, and a number of other partners, including Beatport. And the idea is it's an AI music companion that you can train and create new content with. So imagine having a direct relationship with your favorite artist where they're almost there in your pocket, and you can create music with them and start learning more about their journey and getting closer into sort of their vision of what their art is all about. So we're launching Chorus in the next few weeks, and really fun new ways for fans to ultimately not only collect music in a really fun way, but also create very quickly. It's built on a bunch of different AI models. For example, the Mousetrap one is built, literally using Mousetrap's content. So it's a fully legitimized way for fans to create using licensed content within the scope of an AI experience. So really fun. It kind of lowers the barrier of creation and lets fans come in and almost like own their own one-of-one remix. And through that, we've got this fun layer of this companion, which is a really cute species. There's a whole ton of them that we'll be launching, which, as mentioned, just kind of introduces new ways to kind of interact and participate with, your favorite artists. And through that, whether it's on mobile, on web, the idea is this companion, the species of companions, are basically there with you everywhere you go. And they are your guide into the sort of ecosystem of music experiences that we're developing. So that goes live in a few weeks. And from there, that will drip feed all of the other products and partnerships that we've got. So your companion will not only show you some experiences that you can engage with in our platform, but you may then go to a game like the Sandbox or go to another platform, and the journey continues. Everything you've collected is there with you. You're sort of continuing to kind of accrue and experience this music universe in a bunch of different ways. So you're really fun. And a lot of this is a lot of testing, right? I think when you're trying to kind of experiment with new ways of music interactivity, we have to try new things out. Some of them won't work, like that's natural. I think, not all are going to be, completely what people are looking for, which is something that we've also learned. But yeah, I think it's a really exciting time. One of the things I think about music is it has so much potential as an interactive format. But if you think about the most successful music games, Guitar Hero, Beat Saber, it's the same format. It's a rhythm game. It's the only kind of format of music gaming that's really pushed and broken through, which I think is great on the one hand and also disappointing because people just fall back to the same template. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, rhythm games are great. They have a real place and get you closer to the music. I absolutely love the premise of a rhythm game.
They're a little more accessible too to non-musical people, right? Because you don't have to deal with harmony constructs and melody and all of that kind of stuff, right?
Completely. And they really can bring people closer to music in so many ways and teach them about, the musical experience. But we wanted to break away from that paradigm and show that there's other ways for music interactivity to emerge that aren't just going to fall back into the same kind of format. So that included a lot of testing. And for us, the main thing is we believe everyone is a creator. Music, we think, is going to have a sort of Instagram moment where Instagram made everyone a photographer. And I think the next generation of products will give everyone the ability to experience music and actually express their musical identity without being kind of feeling like it's for the elite or for a top 1% of people. And I think that's really one of the key missions that we're really excited about, is how can we make music more accessible, not only to, collect it and experience it in that way, but also get closer to the experience of creating music. And these companions ultimately are your guide. I think the role of these companions is to teach you and kind of walk you through the process in such a fun way that you don't realize you're getting deeper into a musical experience and actually even learning how to make a track. But it's all, done through the lens of gaming, which allows us to kind of teach people in a much more fun and exciting way where, I'm sure, Jeremy, music, you can lose inspiration. There's so many challenges in the kind of music process that put people off. And we're really excited about how gaming can ultimately break that apart and kind of make it so much more accessible for people.
Yeah, so many great things that that you set out there in that response. We're getting some great action in the chat. People are super excited about Chorus and what's coming up. A couple of questions from B. Earl. And one is, is it about collecting songs or creating songs? I think the answer to that is both. And having everything tracked. And if I create something using this new AI tool, there's a portion of what I create, if monetized, will come back to me, and it's all blockchain tracked and traced, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Ben, I'm a big fan as well. Ben is a genius. If you haven't seen Ben's work, by the way, guys, check it out. He is one of the most exceptional writers and creatives in the space. I'm a huge fan. So glad to see he's in the chat, Ben. Appreciate you jumping in. Yeah, absolutely. Everything is tracked on the blockchain. The way we think about it is, so the content that musicians can put into our game or our platform, we call artist DNA. It's basically the sort of body of work that represents an artist's music, not just the full track, but the stem files. So like the vocals, the bass lines, the melodies, all the way down to the artwork. And the idea is players can collect this DNA and then use it to create new content. So I can take the DNA of one of my favorite artists, like let's say Deadmaus or another act, put it into my AI model and into my companion to generate something new. And once that new thing has been generated, we can see what was used to create it, and any value that's created with this new output, some money will always go back to the original artist. So you could think about it like remixing in many ways. It's just bringing a new a business model and interface that kind of makes remixing accessible for the mass. And kind of opens that idea of co-collaboration and creativity in a way, in a format that we think is pretty fresh and has a pretty unique business model on it. Because I think one of the biggest challenges is right now there's an explosion for the last few years around user-generated content. TikTok, great example. Fans are creating all this amazing content, blowing up songs in some cases, but there's no real meaningful business model behind that allows artists to truly capture the value. It's just promo, it's just reach, right? That's what every platform is selling artists. Like, hey, we'll give you some reach, right? That's not, artists don't need reach. Like, they need revenue. They need direct relationships with their fans. And a lot of what we're thinking about is how do we start to open that up to create some business models here where fans can create UGC, but artists actually can benefit from the value that was created there as much as the fans, whether that's through selling some new items or just creating some interesting new reward mechanisms that incentivize fans for being like collaborators and creating content with their favorite artists' music.
Bi-directional value exchange, Jeremy. Common threads across the weeks. Again, now we've got music joining with the film and the writing of a few weeks ago. We're big fans of Ben as well. We've got big Ben love. He's been on the show.
Nice.
So looking at your backdrop, okay, there's a lot of like 303s, 808s. I see a lot of does this technology and do your platforms lend themselves to a particular genre of music, house music, trance music, drum and bass, jungle, or is that easier to replicate? Are the AI models better at replicating that? Or is that just your personal choice, or is that the market choice? I mean, can it replicate the Credence? I mean, is there that kind of guitar music also possible?
Yeah, no, good question. I think AI is evolving very quickly. Music, like AI generative music, has been a little bit harder than images. There's obviously a lot of data that's kind of being processed when it comes to video and audio. It does lend itself initially better to electronic music. I think that's electronic music is a lot more repeatable and kind of has a bit more of a sort of loopy style, whereas a song that may have a bit more of a dynamic kind of human feel isn't so easily emulated necessarily with pure AI. But for us, it's not about just using AI exclusively. Like, the human has to have a role. If it's so easy to just click generate and you're just making a song, you haven't really done anything, there's no creative input, I don't think that's where the future of this is going. I think people will still want to express themselves and feel like their DNA, like their blueprint is embedded in the creative output of what they've made. So it's always a blend. I think, the technology helps facilitate creativity, but it's not the end goal. Like, the goal is to make sure that whoever's using it feels like they can express themselves and they've been able to, have an idea or an emotion and bring it to life, or just make something fun and kind of get lost in the process of it. We're not looking at the idea that AI just kind of removes like the creative from the process in any way. So I think ultimately, like, any genre is possible. Like, right now AI can make music from hip hop to dance music to really interesting experimental stuff, and probably can't emulate a songwriter very well, or like a human guitar at the level that you might want just yet. But I think that's coming very quickly. But for me, I always go back to the key thing. I think it's, how do we let the user feel like they've actually been able to express themselves and, bring their idea to life in a way that's meaningful. And the AI just assists you. It kind of guides you through that process, and the technology rather guides you through the process and simplifies that, in a number of ways. But, it's still early. I think there's a lot to learn through this and figuring out what people want. ChatGPT changed the world overnight. OpenAI changed the world overnight in the blink of an eye, to going back to this basic premise that text is a way for us to manifest a whole reality. We can literally have any idea, and as long as you can describe it, you can manifest it. And is music going to go in that direction? Will we go in the direction where you can literally describe a feeling of a song and continue to describe a feeling just with words and it will generate what you want? Like, probably. Is that how music production is going to look? Maybe. I think there's an element of it that might look like that, not the whole way through. So it's really exciting. Like, we're sort of in this space where, I love all the devices. I love the immersion of the devices, but it's also limiting, because not everyone can gain access to having, like technology. And so the interface, I think, of music is naturally changing. And we've seen this sort of dematerialization, right? From like you needing to have a whole studio to everything now can just, it's in your phone. You don't even need any of this, and you can make a better song than I probably can. So I think it's really just, how the technology is evolving and how it's enhancing creativity is really exciting. Whether it's obviously the technology is a big part of it, but yeah, there's so much changing. But I think the interface is a big aspect of like the evolution of music, and where I think the innovation comes from is people reimagining the interface and sort of thinking about music in a slightly more immersive way.
Making it more accessible too for folks that wouldn't know how to navigate a patch bay or how to sync logic from 4 programming elements, right? And that kind of thing. I want to
That's most people, Jeremy, in the world. That is most people.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. So I want to lay out an analogy, Inder, and then I also want to explore the AI tech just a hair deeper, because I've been nerding out on it quite a bit. And then Matt's got a couple of great questions in the chat. So the analogy is with this artist DNA thing. Like, I start to think about it like, what if you could like API an artist's creative process or outlook, right? Say I'm an artist and I want to give people access to how I make a song. Is that a good analogy to explore what you're doing with these artists?
100%, 100%. So the way we look at it is artist DNA is ultimately access to not only the base content that an artist has to make up their work, like I said, stem files and more, like the raw material, but also a model that basically has been made up using all of this content. So let's just take a hypothetical example. Mousetrap, they have a new compilation that's coming out. There's the music that makes up the compilation, and then an AI model that's been trained on that music. And fans get access to both. They can buy the music, they can buy the raw elements like the stem files, and then they can also use the AI model, which has been trained on all of that. And you basically gain access, directly to an API, which you can prompt, you can directly co-create with. So you can then make a remix off the back of this AI model and generate your own one-of-one remix, or export some stem files that you might want to go and remix and do something else with. So absolutely, I think this is the future, right? Artists are going to have their own APIs, they're going to have their own models, and they will give seamless access to fans, to collaborators, to basically co-create with them without necessarily having some of the traditional hurdles of music. It's so amazing, right? Music it's so beautiful because it's so simple in its form, and in many ways the production software hasn't evolved either. Like Ableton, I love Ableton, right? It's one of the main softwares people use, but it's not real time. You can't multiplayer collaborate with people. Like, it blows my mind that this is still where music is, right? Yet the rest of the world has moved on to a asynchronous, real time, 500 people in the same document at once, co-creating together, but music is not there. And I think the technology is now slowly kind of getting there, where this idea of like new ways to co-create together, new ways to collaborate are going to emerge. And artists, in order to access this, need to basically have control over their own IP. We need to be independent.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important point. And Matt, this will tie into your question, I think, a little bit in the discussion. But I think one of his questions is, how do you convince artists, managers, labels to kind of get on board with this? And previously, when it was like, hey, artist A, let Jimmy from Salt Lake City, who started playing bass 3 months ago, submit tracks for your record. Or it's like, hey, I don't know that I want to give that kind of access. I love my fans, but I need to control the creative integrity of the IP, right? So now the technology is out to where artists can be comfortable putting what they want to put in and controlling what they want to put in very succinctly, right? Is that kind of the case?
Yeah, absolutely. So control is the key. I think you nailed it. Like, the first thing is, like, we can't just I don't think it makes sense to just open this out and every artist is like, oh, just like 10,000 fans, 100,000 fans come co-create with me. You can if you want. But I think the first is, like, artists need to have control. They need to have control on whether their content is being used in an AI model. And they need to have full transparency on that. We can't have people building models off other people's IP without ultimately paying for it in the first place, or licensing it in some way where there's a clear business model. So that's the first piece for us that we care about. We see many companies out there basically taking advantage of other people's IP, not getting the approvals they need, just, doing what the tech industry does, which is kind of take it, just ask for forgiveness later. Like, that's, just do whatever you need to now, and that's fine. I guess it's because of how limiting the music industry can be. But the first step is definitely control, right? Artists need to be able to decide whether their IP is being used in a model or not. Now, from there, they can then choose who gains access to their content, their model, whether they want to give it to a fan, whether, for us, the artist can choose to even, specify, like, my top 500 fans who've gone through a process of vetting, and they can make sure that the ones who are going to receive it are super fans or collaborators that they trust. So I think it's all down to control, right? The artist needs to have the tools to make the decision on, first of all, is their content being used in an AI model? And then second, who has access to make new things out of their IP, and how do they have transparency on whether their IP was even used in the first place? And these are big challenges, not easily solvable, especially in AI. There's no like way, no need to pretend that we have a solution for that today, because AI is a black box. Like, you don't know if it referenced, The Weeknd, and, also took a little bit of Mozart to create this new output. But there are ways for us to start to think about that control and give artists, the level of ownership and transparency that they need. But I think the future is all about control, and artists having the ability to make a decision on who gains access to their content and having full transparency on that, so that they can decide how they want to build their career with their fans or with other collaborators.
Yeah, and to me too, what makes this interesting, and Matt, this goes along with your question as well, is that this journey map that you can sketch out with each artist in particular can eventually be automated, right? So like you could have a very complicated journey, but you could automate it in a way and make it transparent in a way that makes it really easy to do. Like if we didn't have this tech and we had to track it all in spreadsheets, like it'd be a nightmare and no one would want to do it. So I think that the tech is there and makes it pretty interesting. Mark, I've been talking a lot. What's on your mind?
No, you've been talking because this is your domain. I just going back to the human input. I've been thinking about kind of AI and art, and one of the things, I mean, we've all created something. And I remember when I was in a band when I was young, and we wrote our songs, and a lot of the spark, and you'll know this, AI runs on prompts, and a lot of the creative spark comes from an unknown place that doesn't have a prompt, and you can't put it into words where that creation is. You can't tell an AI to create this and this, because that thought process doesn't really exist. So you can't put it into words. So there'll always be, or at least for the time being, that creative input, which is so important to everything that Inder's been saying, is that it has to have artist participation. And then even if they control the IP and they're passing it on, then there still has to be this input from the fan or the super fan or whoever is using that IP to create something new. And that's I was just been thinking about that. Questions, direct questions. Keep going, Jeremy. What's on your mind?
It's an interesting point. Like I think the idea of prompting and the creative process, because I guess on the one hand, like when you're making music, sometimes you just press a note and the sound creates this emotion, and from there you can follow a whole journey of a sequence of notes that makes sense. But if you don't have the language of music, how do you get closer to it? And I think prompting and you just natural language is actually, it's strangely simple just to describe a song and a sound and a feeling and see where that goes, and sort of going down that path of what happens if you were to just describe it as some sort of emotion or some sort of feeling. Like, does that get people closer to, feeling like they understand, what they're making, and how that sound or emotion that they've described in words translates into some form of sonic experience. I think it's really interesting. Like it's such a new space for music to kind of enter. It's very cool.
Well, Jeremy, serendipity is just luck, isn't it? I mean, so an AI, yes, it can generate songwriting serendipity. Just it has to have iterations to make it happen.
I disagree that it is just luck, right? So if Inder and I are songwriters and we've worked at songwriting, meaning we've tried to come up with a bunch of ideas, and a lot of them are really bad, but a couple are really good, but we keep doing it. We're exercising a muscle, right? That can almost engineer serendipity. We can't explain it. It's a subconscious thing, especially when two writers work together. But I put that question in the chat because I wanted to see, like, could AI get to a point where it could do this unconscious processing that I find those aha moments, the happy accidents that come up, right? That's where it's going to get really crazy, I think, right, Inder?
Yeah, I think so. It's an inspiration machine. Like, that's the beauty of AI, is like you could just be stuck with an idea, and like you need something to just give you something to inspire yourself. And I think AI absolutely. Like I tried something a few weeks ago where I was like, let me start a whole process of writing a song, but I'll start with AI. And I just said, like, give me some lyrics with this concept. I took that, put it out into vocals, chop that up, and very quickly I was like in a flow of creativity that was completely just inspired by the initial prompt. So I think it can. I think it's all about the creative process and where you get stuck in it sometimes. Now, traditional music making is a long process. It's a lonely process for many people, and I think once having these tools can kind of open that up as well. It can kind of take it away from being so insular, and you can kind of just jump out for a second, whether it's speaking to OpenAI or ChatGPT rather, get some inspiration, or feeling like you maybe need some help finishing a track off just to kind of recompose or adding a new melody. all of that is coming. It's here. It's going to be in the blink of an eye. And I think it's just going to unlock, so much new creativity. So many artists who struggled to finish their music, to get themselves to that next level, are finally now going to have the tools to present their work. And I think it's a beautiful thing, because it means just more expression, more creativity, kind of, and more stories that people can immerse themselves into, more diverse stories and more.
Yeah.
Well, it's like Picasso said related to artists, everyone is an artist. We just get it kind of beat out of us at the age of 5. Right. And, as we go through, we're told we aren't one, and then we're told we're something else. And that just gets buried, and we lose the opportunity to get into flow states. Right. There are various ways you can get into flow states. Music is one of them. Right. And to give someone access to a musical flow state that doesn't know theory, that is not trained, like, that's some powerful stuff, man.
I agree. I was reading this book, by the way, if you haven't, it's called The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. Definitely check it out. It's very cool. It's just random kind of thoughts. Each chapter is like a page or two, but really fun. He kind of leads with the premise that everyone is a creator, but and essentially, you may not realize it, or it may have just been beaten out of you. But yeah, his premise, I guess, is living is basically a creative act, and creativity is just happening everywhere. You just need to kind of pay attention to it.
It's having the antenna clear. Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
Just one for the book. I'm on my second read of that. It's amazing. I think Inder just answered, like, if we go back to Matt's question about convincing artists and managers and to get on board with this, and just listening to Inder there, if I was a 15-year-old in my bedroom making beats and making rhymes and making music, I would be so excited from what I've just heard. And I guess that's just percolating across the space. So how do you get the managers and the artists on board? I mean, this is a long game, and we're changing culture. So you just have to wait until the next generation, till the teenagers come up, and they're telling their managers and they're telling their labels, no, this is how it's going to be. This is how it is. And is that a better way than trying to just onboard successful musicians and managers and labels who don't need to disrupt the status quo? They don't need to disrupt the ship because it's working. So we all have to stand back and look at this from a cultural perspective, and that takes time. Do we have that time?
Well, that's the inside out, outside in, centrifugal. Like, where does it come from? Does it come from the outside and affect the big old system, or does it come from within the big old system and emanate out? Right? What do you think, Inder?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Let's see if we got back here. Let's see. I got
backstage. Here we go. Yeah, sorry about that. How do I think about that? Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think some artists are willing to disrupt themselves. I know many who are world-class global superstars who are looking at this and they've seen what's coming. They're like, right, someone can basically generate a version of my kind of music, like emulate me. Who am I anymore? And I think the artists I'm speaking to have realized that there's nothing like the original. Like, all of the ideas of like creating a deep fake and creating all these kind of versions of the original means that the original is even more valuable. And the artists that have clicked on that understand that the original is always going to be the most important. And the idea of AI, the idea of deep fakes and giving fans access to co-create with you in some ways is just an extension. It's a way of just extending your reach and thinking about your format and distribution. I think it's like, I like to compare it to radio to MTV, right? Music videos, new canvas, new format for expression, a new way for an artist to bring their vision to life. And when we move into this new space, it's a similar premise, I think. Gaming, AI, NFTs, all of these are just mediums to distribute your message, to express your vision. And it doesn't matter if it's an AI model or a game or anything between. True artists see the medium, they see the canvas, and they understand how to take advantage of it. If you're scared, like, I'm not saying you're not a true artist, but you're waiting, right? I think many artists just see the canvas and they know straight away that they're ready to take advantage of it and bring their story to life in some ways. And I think that's, on the one hand, it's the beauty of music is so simple, right? It's just a song. That's what makes music so magical, is that just a song that doesn't even have this physical representation touches people in so many ways across the world. But at the same time, it also is a limiting factor because we do need to kind of reimagine the format. We do need to think about music in a more dynamic way to bring value back to it, because no one's paying for songs anymore, right? No one's paying for that. So how do we grow the industry? We have to, I think, reimagine the format, reimagine the mediums of distribution. And most of the artists that we speak to, like, they see that. They're like, yeah, of course, it makes perfect sense that there's a new medium to kind of share their music through. So I think it's mixed, but it's going to happen very quickly. You know, what's happening with this kind of transition is it's almost here in a blink of an eye, and it will just become the norm. I think, you know, you'll see some of the case studies being formed, and some form of precedent will be created, some business model, some structure that gives people like the feeling of that they can have some level of control. And once those pieces are in place, the rest of the world kind of jumps in. But we're in the early adopter space right now. It's the visionaries like Richie, like Deadmaus, like Grimes, like Holly Herndon, Imogen Heap, right? They're the ones who see the future, they build the future, and then everyone else follows.
Couple quick
done something then, because like they were first with the NFTs as well. They're all Imogen Heap's always ahead of the game.
Oh yeah, for sure. She's been ahead for so many years. It blows my mind. She was actually the reason I even got into blockchain and Web3 like 7 years ago. I was 24, I think, and I saw what she was doing with Mycelia, and even now it stands the test of time. Like, she was absolutely right that this is where the future of music is going. So it's amazing. I mean, those are the artists that I think they create the foundations for everyone to then like understand how to play, and then, you know, companies will come in and build some structure so that it can actually turn into something meaningful, not just the Wild West.
Yeah, a couple quick comments. So Social, great to see you in the chat. Agree, like the original versions 100%, but this access to the artist, in addition to seeing the original version, it can like pull the connection even more, I would think, as well. It's a really interesting point of engagement. One takeaway that I had, Inder, on this, actually there's a lot of takeaways, my brain's swirling, but one thing I tend to think about, that you said, you know, individuals disrupting themselves, and I think that's a very important construct, because we look at large industries that have been in place for years, that have large systems, that if we look to reinvent those systems, it's an uphill battle that we get frustrated with, and you know, and then we, you know, worry about that problem more than the art itself, right? So the more people can look to disrupt themselves and change themselves and evolve, that's a really important point. And I would say that, like, all the artists listening, that's a really great mindset to think about with AI, with emerging tech, with all of this stuff, because there's an application of it, and and it's all tests, right? We're doing tests, we're doing iterations, and you guys have demonstrated that for the last few years. Mark, I know we're running close. We're actually a little bit over on time. I want to be respectful of everyone listening, of your time. Inder, Mark, do you have any kind of wrap up thoughts, or do we want to run him through the hot buttons, or what are we thinking to wrap up?
We need again, we need another 3 hours to do this. Maybe we should do some long form extended podcast. I get music for me, and it's special amongst the arts, is that I can turn on the radio and listen to a song that I've known for, I don't know, like 30 years, that I've listened to hundreds of times, and I can turn it on and it can take me somewhere, and I can feel something, and it doesn't wear out. And it's unusual in the art forms, because you can't watch a film or read a book or even look at art again and again and again and again and again over the years and still be touched by it. And I guess that's because it's in the black holes, Jeremy. Like, we began with music in the black holes and the physics of jazz, and it kind of, there's something about it. And listening to Inder, I'm very excited about where that progression goes next. I'm going to get my guitar out.
Amazing. Well, Inder, such a pleasure talking to you. I think we could riff for like 3 hours on all of this stuff, and I'm so excited to check out Chorus, and you know, let us know, send some notes to Mark where we could send out to our audience what's coming up, how to access it, how to get involved, and definitely keep us in the loop, because you've been at the cutting edge of this stuff for the last few years, and I think it can only get more fun from here.
No, I really appreciate your time, and yeah, it's great to chat. It's like, you're absolutely right. We can probably keep going for a few more hours, but yeah, it was a great conversation. I love it.
Awesome.
Excellent. So our friends listening, we can check out all the replays on thinkingonpaper.xyz. We're up on YouTube as well, Spotify for the audio version, and look forward to future episodes. Mr. Fielding, great to see you again. Get out and do some snowboarding. We'll see you next week.
Season's over.
Thank you.